Good evening. My name is Coca Treviño, founder of the Proyecto. Together with the MAS Barrientos Mexican American Cultural Center, we're thrilled to have this special edition of Spanglish series with Emmanuel Ortega as a guest. Today we're going to talk about a bunch of things relevant to la independencia de México y todas las repercusiones y todo lo que ha estado pasando con estos eventos tan importantes en nuestra cultura. As you know, this program is dedicated to champion Latinx excellence and inspire communities into action. If you don't know about Emmanuel, aka Babelito in some of the areas, in some of the programs, Emmanuel, he is a clinical visiting professor, Department of Art and Art History of the University of Illinois, Chicago. He's also co-producer of Unsettling Journeys, that is kind of what we're going to talk about. And also co-host of our favorite podcast, Latinos Who Lunch. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for being here with us. Thank you for making the time. Welcome.
Que show. Muchísimas gracias, Coca. Thank you so much. It is a pleasure. I was geeking out. I woke up today and I was like, ooh, I get to talk about Mexican history. Así que, órale.
Vamos. Bueno, primero dime tantito de ti, de que platícame algo de tu journey, de que cómo es que llegas a ser este profesor, esta eminencia de los estudios de arte, historia y el reaprender.
Bueno, pues I was born in LA. My parents lived there for several years, but my dad was not happy with this country. So 5 years after moving to Los Angeles, he decided that no more. He wanted to be with family and friends back in Ciudad Juárez. So I grew up in Ciudad Juárez. I was 5 months old when we moved to Juárez. So from 5 months to 13, 14 years old, I lived in Ciudad Juárez. I went to la secundaria, la primaria. So my elementary school was all in Mexico. Then we moved to El Paso, but that almost didn't count because I was ditching school to go back to Juárez and have fun with my friends, always hanging out at the little cafecito called Dali. I was always inclined to art. I was very emo back then. And then we moved to Vegas because at the late 90s, there was a boom of construction. And my dad is a construction worker. I don't know how it is today, but back in the day, Texas didn't believe in unions. So he was a certified carpenter and no tenía unión. So he moved to Nevada and our life completely changed. So by 1998, we moved to Las Vegas. And I was there for my undergraduate in Las Vegas, Nevada. Believe it or not, I had a great education in the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And right after the time I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do. I know that I wanted to continue to study art, but it wasn't until I was able to travel. I have the privilege to have papers, and I was able to travel through Mexico and also different parts of Italy and Europe. And it wasn't until I actually traveled to Guanajuato, that I decided that I wanted to learn more about the art that I saw, because my travels were that. People think that I went and was going from hostel to hostel, drinking my way through Europe and Mexico. No, I will wake up.
I mean, of course, but also learning.
I did it. I remember I took my cousins with me to Europe. And by the way, I'm still paying that credit card that I took back in 2005. And they're like, let's go out and let's go listen to the local electronic music. I'm like, no, we're going to wake up early to go to the Vatican. I've always been a nerd. So I amaze mental library of images, but it wasn't until I go to Mexico that I realized that the art that I was seeing was more impactful to me, and I knew much less. I knew more about Italian culture, Italian geography, and Italian art than my own country. That's when I decided that I wanted to get a master's and PhD in colonial art history. So I applied to the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, y ahí es cuando empecé. That's when I got woke. That's when I started to understand Mexican history in a different way. That's when I started to think about art in a completely different way. I understood that I knew nothing about the colonial period. And that's a reason for that, because every 6 years in Mexico, there's a movement to try to change basic education texts, for instance. And the colonial history always gets erased. So we learn about La Virgen de Guadalupe, Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, y la Independencia, and that's it. But we are a product of the colonial period. That's something that I learned in graduate school. So in a way, staying in academia more than anything is because I want to teach that. I want to show kids, especially Latinx kids, that we are a product of the colonial period. And a lot of the problems that we are having, we're facing every day to this day, could be to a certain degree resolved if we contextualize the history of where we came from. That's why I'm teaching Latin American colonial art. That's why we bring those ideas into Latinos Who Lunch. And that's one of the reasons why my husband and I decided to start this YouTube channel dedicated to untangling the history of mestizaje. So that's Emmanuel Ortega in a nutshell.
No, I love it, because I got introduced to what you do through Latinos Who Lunch. And I've always said the same thing, like it's the best way for you to learn and be silly and super smart at the same time. Like it, and in this times that we're trying to relearn to honestly like go forward and understand what everything's happening. This is the information that we need. We need to figure out what the hell is going on, and
right.
how can we make sense of it, and how can we just come out of it and be better in understanding our roots and understanding everyone else's roots and who we are.
Right. And the thing about it, sorry to interrupt you, and the thing about it is that we have pointed out the problems. We know, for instance, that there's racism in the world. We understand that there's sexism in the world, ageism in the world, there's xenophobia, there's homophobia. There's a lot of things that affect us to this day. So it's very easy for us to point the finger because we see it. It's impossible not to see it. Images and information regarding what I tell my students are the tools of hate, which is race, gender, and class, are everywhere. Now, why? Why do we have sexism? Why do we have homophobia? Why do we have racism? So to try to make sense of that, at least for our Latinx community, it's part of my goal. It's part of my philosophy, because it's easy to say that person was being racist. But where does that racism stem from? What it inclined that person beyond thinking about the psychology behind of people that are racist or whatever? What are the historical contexts of that racism? Where did it come from? And when you realize how it works, when you realize how history functions, then it's much easier to explain it, to point the problems behind it, and to try to find solutions. So I for that reason, I always find my classrooms as radical spaces that I work towards creating more equality in the world through the classroom. Perhaps there's other things that can be done, but that's my journey, and that's my struggle, and that's my war. That's how I resist. It is in the classroom, and I've been fortunate enough to produce amazing students that are doing great things in the world, you know.
Oh, qué increíble. Sí, una cosa con la que yo me he topado, y creo que ese fue un poquito del comienzo de yo estar más abierta al cambio, era ese como instinto de ¿por qué estoy defendiendo cosas que me afectan a mí?
Exacto.
¿Por qué cuando alguien dice algo de que algún chiste súper machista o misógino o así horrible, de que y por qué sí me incomoda, pero dejo que los demás estén hablando de que ¿por qué? Y es de que no, a ver, yo estoy entrenada a defender al hombre blanco cristiano. De que estuve en colegio católico y todo, y las monjas increíbles, y creo que estuve súper privilegiada de tener una educación muy buena, pero al mismo tiempo, esos son los valores que estábamos entrenados a defender. Entonces, cada vez que estoy así incómoda, pero al mismo tiempo es de que, a ver, ¿por qué? Pero sí toma mucho esfuerzo personal, pero también ahí está la información de que vivimos en una época donde tenemos mucho acceso a información, entonces nada más es de buscarle bien y de apegarnos a espacios como los tuyos donde están highlighting otras verdades y otras perspectivas.
Pero las herramientas del odio están naturalizadas. O sea, we are racist, sexist, and everything is. Porque ya así nacimos. O sea, o sea, from the first day, when they tell you, ay, qué bonito, qué bonita, you already started to constitute ideas of human beauty that in a way they're given to us from the Greeks. What about African cultures and Asian cultures and pre-Columbian cultures, you know? So from the day you're born, we are starting to think about, oh, look at you, you're a girl. So we're going to dress in pink. And look at you, que bonita. And look at you. Like, so from day one, you are born, as scholar Judith Butler says, a matrix of intelligibility. So by the time you start having access to social media and start to participate in these conversations, you don't think about it twice. And I don't blame people for that. And yes, the information is out there. The problem is that the information is encoded through bubbles. So like when you are in social media, you in a way coordinate or curate your own information. So it becomes, even though there's tons of information for people to be woke and to stay woke, it's almost impossible to have access to it because precisely for that, because we naturalize those things as being normal. So we don't even seek answers, don't even seek this type of explanations. But in a way, that's kind of my journey. And I always do it. I try to do it through humor. I try to do it in different ways. But it's very, very complicated. Like in my classes, for instance, when I start deconstructing not the idea of the Virgen de Guadalupe, but the actual painting of the Virgen de Guadalupe. When I tell my students, esa fue una pintura pintada por un indígena, they like their whole entire world like crumbles. They're like, ¿qué? Like, ¿cómo chingados? You know? And you start working and say, well, this is the iconography. This is how it works. These are the decisions behind this image. That's what this image, and not to say that it's not important, and not to say not to believe in the image, but there's a history behind it. And you realize that the history of the Virgen de Guadalupe, just like every other image produced in Mexico in the colonial period, is embedded with the tools of hate. Ideas of race, gender, and class are embedded in everything we have been indoctrinating visually for 500 years.
Sí, no. Está increíble de que el reto que tenemos enfrente está súper pesado, pero de nuevo de que cada vez más tenemos herramientas y gente que dedica su vida y su tiempo a corregir estas ideas. Y
yo me acuerdo mucho, antes de que continúes, yo me acuerdo mucho de mi suegro, porque siempre él me pregunta, ¿no? Yo soy muy religiosos. So he's always like, dime más sobre la Virgen de Guadalupe. Like, I want to know more. Like, they ask questions. And one day he goes, Babelito, las conversaciones que nosotros tenemos, que la Virgen de Guadalupe, que la nación, que la independencia de México, son muy ricas y me gustan mucho. Pero antes de dormir, yo le pido perdón a Jesucristo y rezo por y rezo por ustedes. Because it's complicated. Like, that in a way tells you the sort of like challenges that we have, but also the values that we have as a society, you know?
Y el trabajo increíble que se aventaron en eleccionar a tanta gente en cosas que van en contra de nosotros mismos. De que, honestamente, ¿qué campaña tan inmaculada se aventaron?
Hablando de la Virgen.
Hablando de la Virgen. Bueno, vamos a darle para adelante y platícanos de la independencia, los signos, de qué es lo que has aprendido en esa era.
Pues mira, de chiquito, y te voy a decir que para que veas cómo estamos indoctrinados en estas ideas. Yo me acuerdo de chiquito porque yo estaba en teatro, obvio, y de chiquito yo estuve en una obra de teatro que se llamaba Ellos, y era sobre un grupo de chavitos que tenían muchos sueños. Entonces, todos hablaban de sus sueños y no sé qué. Entonces, en el programa de la obra de teatro, cuando tú llegabas así como audiencia, lo leías y a nosotros nos dijeron que habláramos de un sueño que hayamos tenido. Y yo me acuerdo muchísimo de un sueño donde yo luchaba por la independencia de México con Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla y la
conmigo, doña Josefa.
corregidora. Como decía yo de chiquito, la corredora de Querétaro, pero era la corregidora de Querétaro. So I remember just like, I was passionate about history as a kid, but also I truly believe a lot of those ideas. Fast forward to grad school, when in University of New Mexico, shout out to all my professors that really like put things in a different context. Because believe it or not, prior to 1821, we were an extension of Europe, right? From 1521, when Tenochtitlan falls after it was invaded by the Spanish or by the Castilians, to 1821, when we finally, the Declaration of Independence was signed on my birthday, September 27. Then there was no Mexico. There was Mexica cultures, there were Nahua cultures, but there was no Mexico. Why Mexica? Why would we not name something after the Tarahumaras or the Otomi, right? So that's what we started to learn, but we did it through art. So one of the things that we learned is that after 1821, Mexico, half like the conservators, los conservadores de México decían, no, la historia empieza cuando llega Hernán Cortés, because that's when Christianity is brought to, right? When Christianity is brought to the Americas. And the liberals are like, no, it actually goes back to the pre-Columbian period, more specifically the Aztecs. And it was almost like a challenge, like a back and forth. And a way to articulate those feelings after 1821, a way to articulate those ideas, it was done through La Academia de San Carlos, which was the first art academy in all of the Americas. People don't know that Mexico had the first art academy. And the students were challenged to illustrate how Mexico looked like. What was the history of Mexico? And the images produced in La Academia de San Carlos they were so successful that you can open un libro de la Secretaría de Educación Pública de Historia de segundo grado and you still see those same paintings. You still see the same things. But in this whole articulation, after independence of what is Mexico, how does Mexico look like, they started to look at other examples. And one important example was Italy, because Italians, as they're also gaining, because the idea of nation and nationhood, it's happening in the 18th and 19th century throughout Europe and Latin America. The Italians, as a glorious past, they had the Romans. And people in Mexico City are like, oh, so we have the Aztecs.
Yeah.
And throughout Latin America, it's like that. In Guatemala, los Mayas. In Peru, los Incas. We always attach ourselves to the big empires because in a way, we want to create a new empire. So Mexico chose the Aztecs. And that's why you see el calendario Azteca and tatuajes de cholos and lowriders, because that identifies us as a nation. But it's not because we're all Aztecs. That's a fallacy. It's because in the 19th century, Mexicans decided that Mexico was based on the Aztec world. And that's what's happening. But all of that happened after independence. And even learning about the independence is very interesting because it wasn't so black and white. Los malos contra los buenos y vámonos, you know? Like, yeah. It was a little bit more...
Sí nos lo enseñan así, de que el padre, súper buena onda, va, echa el grito, Y vámonos.
It's super glorioso. And the thing about Mexico and Latin America is that we're so sentimental. Like sentimentalismo es el lenguaje de los mexicanos. And that's one of my book projects. Where does that come from? So it's el grito de Dolores, right? Even the last
No, parte increíble, claro.
It's so sentimentalist, and we love that stuff. Nos encanta. El lenguaje de José José y de las telenovelas, it's not like, o sea, de casualidad. We've been thinking about those ideas since the 18th century, even before. We've been romanticizing the encounter of Moctezuma and Cortés y la Malinche for 500 years. And that's kind of the project of my book. It's how that encounter basically tells everything that we are. So that encounter has been reimagined. La Malinche era buena, en el siglo XVII era mala, a finales del XVII se convirtió en buena, y ahora es la traidora. Why? How? And all of that reimagining of the encounter, of el encuentro, informs who we are and informs, once again, the tools of hate. And the same thing with the independence. We have been reimagining the independence since 1821. We think about Hidalgo, which, of course, he's a Catholic priest, right? Because the basis of our nationhood are Catholic. But we don't learn that he was a Jesuit. We don't learn that he was a Creole. He had his own interests. So to a certain degree, some scholars believe that he was using indigenous people for his own purposes. And that's something that we're never going to learn in school. One, because it's too complicated to tell kids. And two, because it goes against the glorious notions that we have of the independence. That Mexico's independence, it's an incredibly important event. It is. That they kicked out the Spanish, they did. But it wasn't so black and white. There was a lot of interests in a play, you know?
Wow, sí, está súper interesante porque obviamente las personalidades son súper complejas, el juego que toma la religión, que vaya desde el colonialismo, de que cómo ha estado embedded en todo lo que se hace y se dice y cómo se weaponize.
Yes.
Sí, entonces, sí, yo me acuerdo haber leído de esto, es como de las dos partes, las dos caras de la moneda de estos eventos, y eso, como a quién le sirve que esté narrado de una manera o de otra. O me acuerdo que también de los niños héroes que se platicaba mucho, que ese es otro, pero que los pobres los habían arrumbado, de que ni siquiera, o sea, sí, está increíble.
Me encanta que me tiro por la patria. ¡Ay! Cayó en un abismo de pasión, ¿verdad? Like, but that's the narratives that have worked. And think about it, like, it makes sense. If we don't romanticize and create an idealized history, you don't believe in your nation. And if you don't believe in your nation, you don't believe in unity. And your people are gonna, do whatever they want. So in a way, you have to control all of that. The problem is that the tools that are used to keep us in order, to keep everything in place, are the same tools that were brought to us by the Spanish. And to a certain degree, they were already here. Again, race, gender, and class. And class plays such an important part of who we are in Mexico. People say, oh, there's no racism in Mexico. It's not like that. It's just that racism in Mexico doesn't function like it functions in the United States. In the United States, we have a very binary system. Blanco y negro, right? And a lot of the history that we learn in the United States, it's that binary. The power relations between blackness and whiteness, and the myth of blackness and whiteness, and the harsh realities of blackness and whiteness. In Mexico, it's about class. It is about the color of skin, but not really, because some powerful people in Mexico are brown, right? So it's not as simple as black and white or brown and white, but it is about negotiations of class. And that's a result of our casta system.
Yeah.
And in the 18th century, well, 17th, 18th century, in Mexico, there was an establishment of a casta system. So basically, it was a blood quantum system. If you were able to prove that you were Spanish, you were Spanish. And you can look half Mexica and half Japanese, because we had people from all over the world, just like today in Mexico. But if you could prove somehow that you came from Spanish blood, it didn't matter how you look. You will be considered Spanish. So everything was negotiated through paperwork. Y hasta la fecha, en México es una broma de que cuando vas a que te conecten la luz, te piden el certificado de defunción de tu abuelita, like all this paperwork, right? That's our colonial legacy. That's our colonial legacy. So this sort of the idea of how we function, or the power relationships in Mexico through class, race, and gender, most specifically class, inform everything in the colonial period. And everything had to be proven by paperwork. And there's trials upon trials upon trials on the Inquisition of people proving their casta. And I said that color didn't matter as much because it's true. Like, you had some very powerful former slaves in Mexico, but they inherited lands, right? So it didn't matter that they were Black. It just mattered that they had land. So it was about a class. So that's what I'm saying, that in order for us to truly understand what happens in the independence movement during that period, we have to understand that colonial period, to understand that the independence wasn't just about kicking out the Spanish. It's about the power of the Creole peoples. It was the supremacy, and that's what I call the white supremacists of Mexico. I call them the Creoles. Y el movimiento del criollismo, where you had some of the first generation of Spanish that were born in Mexico, started in the late 1600s. La poesía de Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, la retórica de Góngora, las pinturas de Correa y Villalpando. They all are working in the same decades, 1680s and 1690s. And they are using Spanish, Latin, Nahuatl, using the language of European painting and Mexican. Like, they're using all of these global ideas to create our idea of criollismo. Yeah. And criollos saw themselves as superior than everybody else. Fast forward to independence, some of the main leaders of the independence were Creoles, because they've been seeing themselves as better and superior than anybody else in Mexico. They led the movement of independence. Is it a good thing or bad thing? I'm not gonna say.
Sí, porque igual era una posición muy difícil, porque vengo de esto y mis papás o mis ancestros son europeos, entonces tengo que apegarme a sus reglas, o yo soy de aquí y tengo genes bla 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 de que I rule.
Y así como funciona la idea de la identidad, así funciona la historia. Some of the most important documents that were used to talk about the history of Mexico came from the collection of Góngora. So Góngora, who was this criollo, él tenía una colección que le fue heredada a él por un cacique, una persona indígena con mucho poder. Por ejemplo, uno de mis artículos que estoy tratando de publicar ahorita habla sobre el mapa de Sigüenza, que es un mapa de la migración de los mexicas desde Aztlán hasta Tenochtitlán. And just like to put it in context, there were seven mythical tribes. The Mexica, the Tlaxcaltecas, blah, 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 blah. And the Mexicas were chosen by Huitzilopochtli to found Tenochtitlan. And some people believe that Aztlán is in California. Some people believe it's even in Texas, I've heard, in Arizona. Some people, the latest one is in Guanajuato. That's where Aztlán, the mythical place where the emergence of these tribes came out. It's all a legend, right? But it's very important for people. So he had in his possession a map of the migration of Aztlán. And then fast forward to the late 18th century, to the late 1700s, that map gets published by Germans, earlier got published by Italians, and then it was published by the Mexicans. And the Mexicans are starting to articulate that the supremacy of the Creoles is based on Mexico City, because that's where Tenochtitlan is. And that's where they were born. And the seat of the Viceroyalty is Mexico City, just like the seat of Tenochtitlan was in Mexico City. And now the seat of the whole entire country is going to be Mexico City. And for that reason, you turn on the TV and all the soap operas take place in Mexico City or around Mexico City, because that's where identity is forged from, you know? And all of those ideas, all of that visual culture, all of that history, which had been negotiating for 200-300 years, now they're like, we say it, like we just said it, we naturalize it. So now it's all about Mexico City. But like, I'm pretty sure my family has Jewish and Tarahumara blood, which has nothing to do with Góngora and his Creole blood, right?
Ya, y lo que te iba a decir es de que chistoso no es la palabra, pero qué curioso que eso, que empiezan a usar cosas que sus ancestros a lo mejor están, bueno, no a lo mejor, que 100% están tratando de borrar. Y al momento de realzar y ver toda la potencia y el poder y las cosas increíbles que hayan hecho los mexicanos, o los aztecas o mexicas, o todo la gente, los nativos de acá, de que inteligentes de nuevo, de que cómo apropiarse de los dos.
De los dos bandos. En la realidad, y lo que pasa también durante esos procesos es que otros grupos empiezan a borrar. We don't know anything about Otomi history. We don't know anything about our Tarahumara history of our Yaqui blood. The Yaquis y los Tarahumaras durante el siglo XVIII eran cabrones, güey. And they were fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. They were always resistant. We don't know anything about that. We don't know anything about our Pueblo blood from New Mexico, because we have a boundary now between Mexico and the United States. But you know, one of the first and only successful revolution against the Spanish was fought in August of 1680 by indigenous peoples in New Mexico. They kicked out the Spanish for 12 years. Wow. We don't hear that. Nobody did that. The Mapuche, for instance, in Chile, always resisted, and they were never really colonized. But the story is that they came in, they encountered each other, they took over an independence, and now we have Mexico. It's not that simple. Like, indigenous people, not only the Aztecs, or not only the Inca, or not only the Mayans, are important. Indigenous people throughout what today is Mexico and throughout Latin America were fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. And when it came to independence, a lot of those small groups were not part of the equation. They were not part, they didn't get a piece of the cake per se, you know? And that's what it is. It's not that actively historians were trying to erase, I don't know, like Yaqui history. It's just that it's not part of the great romantic narratives of the Aztecs, so they were not part of the equation. And we only learn about that through state history. So like, I learned about the Tarahumaras because I grew up in Chihuahua, ¿verdad? Pero no son parte de la narrativa nacional, cuando la diversidad de lenguajes, de culturas, de arte, de pensamientos indígenas en México. Es increíble, creo que en México tenemos más de 60 y tantos lenguajes indígenas. And we don't learn about that. We don't know anything about it unless it's through fantasies of Mexico that are offered by people like Frida Kahlo and stuff like that, you know? But don't get me started.
No. I'm on your side on that one, so I'll mute myself as well.
Yes. And it's very interesting. And it's very interesting because I have problems with this with my family, because like one time I had a conversation y mi mamá me dice, ¿no crees en la bandera de México? Y que no, pero yo te crié para que tuvieras orgullo. Y no, and like she almost started crying. Mi suegro un día nos dijo, ¿y ustedes no creen en los hombres que nos dieron patria y libertad? And I was like, ay, cabrón. And it's not about not believing or believing. It's about that the history is complicated, that we have to be very critical. And then just like you said in the beginning of the show, that sometimes we have to learn certain aspects about history because it's against us, right? They keep us in a way control. I don't think if people understood the complexities of history, everybody's going to start revolting and then it's the end of the world. It's not going to be like that. But I always think that we always have to question our identities. We always have to question our history. And that's going to offer us a much more critical perspective of who we are as people in this world and the relationships amongst each other, you know?
Sí, y aparte, ahorita en México hay problemas horribles como los feminicidios, las clases, todas estas cosas que, de nuevo, puedes ver el origen de estas ideologías, puedes ver cómo se ha perpetuado cómo se trata a las mujeres, cómo se trata a tanta gente que hacen garras, y todo se puede rastrear a esos momentos.
Exacto, incluso hay un artículo muy interesante sobre, no me acuerdo el título completo, pero sobre epistemicidios. ¿Y qué es un epistemicidio? ¿Qué dijiste tú? What did you call me? Epistemicidio es como que the killing or the destroying of an epistemology. ¿Y qué es una epistemología? La epistemología es una forma de ver el mundo. Entonces, por ejemplo, hay epistemologías indígenas. Antes de que llegaran los españoles, están las epistemologías que dentro de esa, a entender el mundo, vemos la religión, el arte, el lenguaje, la medicina, todo, ¿no? An epistemology is like a whole entire system of knowledge. It's what it is. But this Ramón Grossfogel, he uses the theories of Enrique Dussel, who's an Argentinian philosopher, but he actually teaches, or he used to teach, I don't remember, at UNAM, la Universidad Autónoma de México. He talks about how you can trace all of the problems of the world to 5 moments in history. And those include when the Spanish regained control over the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslims. Because the Iberian Peninsula, up until 1492, precisely the year when Christopher Columbus arrived, it was to a certain degree dominated by Islamic cultures. And that's something that we don't learn, even though our language, words like ajonjolí, for instance, yeah. or dishes like el chile en nogada. Those are part of our Muslim heritage, right? So when the Spanish take over, the Muslims, when they regain control, they start to gain a national pride. Oh, now we're the Catholics. And the Catholics believed that the second coming of Christ was imminent. So they decided to conquer the world in order to save them. That's what Christopher Columbus tried to do. He truly believed in millennialism or millennialism, which it was this belief that the second coming of Christ is coming. So you have that. And then you have the conquest. That's the second movement. So between all of these important historical events, you start creating hierarchies. White supremacy, right? White European cis men on the top, indigenous people on the bottom, any people of color that can serve us on the bottom. Then you have several other events that happen throughout history that truly constitute the problems that we have in the world. And not only Mexico, because when we refer to Mexico, we always refer to a lot of the problems that we have. But feminicide is not just a problem of Mexico. It is a problem in Mexico, but it's everywhere. Trace it back to a lot of those ideas. So when we talk about colonization, again, it shouldn't be a conversation about good versus evil. It's about how evil versus other evils. It's about how evil was transformed into something good, maybe, and something not so good. There's so many different faces to colonization. So the bottom line of this article is that all of that knowledge, all of those 5 events that they basically created all the problems that we have been passed around throughout the university system. And to this day, the knowledge that we learn pretty much around the world in the universities comes from 5 countries and white cis men. So everything that we learn at universities in the United States comes from white cis men from 5 European countries. That's it. And when you start thinking about everything that you are or everything that you think you are and your identity and your history based on only 5 countries when you have thousands, if not millions, of different epistemologies around the world, and yet we have one epistemology, then you're like, ah, canijo, like what are we missing, right? Like all the information that we haven't been able to learn in the university system.
Sí, y gente que no tiene nada que ver con mi realidad o la de mis amigos. Exactly. O la de... Ajá. Sí, y gender es otra cosa que es, híjole, andábamos tan bien, porque no se cambiaron. De que éramos libres de hacer lo que se nos diera la gana, de que, ¿por qué?
Y también es importante entender que, yes, the Spanish came in y cambiaron muchísimas cosas, ¿verdad? Y transformaron muchas cosas de una forma muy violenta, pero también había sistemas de clase, género establecidos. Los aztecas eran un imperio y aterrorizaban al resto de los grupos alrededor del lago Texcoco. Pero siempre hablamos del orgullo azteca y orgullo mexicano, ya. Yeah. Pero la realidad es que ellos también eran un imperio. Entonces, así como criticamos a los españoles, porque es importante, we have to be critical to them, we also have to be critical of the Aztecs, and we also have to be critical of a lot of other cultures. Nobody's perfect. We're humans. We're flawed. Yeah. We're flawed by nature. But the problem is that when you try to shove, o ¿cómo se dice? Como que esforzar una cultura dentro de otra cuando es imposible. That's where the epistemicides happen.
Y que borra, ajá, de que deja tú, meter la cultura de que todo lo que quieras, pero sí, al hacer eso, al mismo tiempo estás borrando la otra.
Exacto.
Eso, sí, es la palabra que no sé cómo decir.
Epistemicide. No, se la inventó, es una palabra dominguera, ni te preocupes. Pero es lo que pasa con la independencia, que sí, o sea, nos da a entender una forma, un aspecto de nuestra historia que es súper interesante y hasta cierto punto es muy bonita.
Sí, y es necesaria. En ese momento sí se ocupaba que pasara.
Exactamente, pero eso no quiere decir que fue un evento perfecto, eso no puede decir que no fue un evento que fue impulsado por muchos intereses, o sea, Hidalgo, así como lo ves el héroe, el cura, todo inocente, like, él tenía sus intereses, güey. So, and that's something that it no ayuda a fomentar una nación saludable. Si tú como nación incluyes en el sistema educativo que los héroes de la patria fueron unos monstruos, obvio que la gente se te va a echar encima, ¿no?
Sí.
O esa es la idea. Pero la realidad es que a mí me ha ayudado muchísimo contextualizar ese tipo de eventos, porque me ayuda a entender muchas cosas. There's a historian in the United States who talks about the Indian predicament, that we look down upon indigenous people, but we look up towards the Aztec past. So like, as Mexicans, we are embedded with ideas of the majestic Aztecs and the Mayans and those indigenous people. But then we might see an indigenous person in the street and we discriminate. What the predicament is not really a predicament when you start to understand that from the conquest all the way to today, there's been a series of negotiation. And slowly, criollos se van poniendo arriba. Just like the Spanish, just like the Europeans throughout the world, through colonization, started to place themselves on the top. In Mexico, the Creoles. So you know what I do in class? We talk about the casta system. Mm-hmm. And I show soap operas. I show Rosa Salvaje. I show there's a horrible Netflix show that is called Made in Mexico. And it's about unos chavos super mega fresas en México. Y una de las primeras escenas es una chava, o sea, she looks white, la sangre de Moctezuma. Y mis papás, o sea, somos super mexicanos, güey, o sea, somos super mexicanos. And I'm watching that, and I'm like, those are the new Creoles. The people with all this like millions and millions of money are the same Creoles. They can claim their blood lineage to the supremacy of the Aztecs and the supremacy of the Creoles of the 18th century that I was talking about. So even though in paper, the casta system doesn't function like that, like it functioned in the 18th century for so many different things. The way that class functions in Mexico, it's the same way, you know? It's super complicated, but then when you start thinking about it, it's really not that complicated, and it's super interesting, and it's super messed up, but at the end of the day, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And I feel like a lot of my students are Chicano students, and a lot of my Chicano students start to understand who they are, their identity, when they start to learn these things in history. And to me, when I see the papers of my students at the end of the semester, that's when I'm like, okay, ya me puedo morir en paz. Like I did my thing, you know?
Qué increíble y qué feliz tenerte como herramienta, y que aparte que estás compartiendo más con tu serie nueva y con Latinos Who Lunch. ¿Me puedes platicar un poquito de ese trabajo nuevo que estás haciendo?
Pues when I met my husband, in a way, I started to have these conversations in the classroom because I started to teach more and more because I had just graduated with my PhD. And when I met him, he was in love, and he still is to a certain degree. We both are, with México, el cine de la época de oro, con María Félix y Dolores del Río. And there's like this, like in terms of aesthetics, the movies are gorgeous, right? The beautiful landscapes. Sí. Son bellísimas las películas del Indio Fernández. Again, el Indio Fernández, right? Because that's part of the El Indio Fernández, Gabriel Figueroa, they're gorgeous. But at the core of those movies, you have this history. You have this complicated history about nationhood that started after independence. So I started to look at those movies because I haven't seen them since I was a kid, Cantinflas y Pedro Infante y todas esas. And I realized that the role of Mexican film in the 1940s was the same role as paintings in the Academia de San Carlos 1800s. It was the same thing. So I was like, oh my God, like nothing changed, just the technologies. But the tools of hate, as they were being created in a little like bubble that was called Mexico, they were later presented to us through cinema, and then later to soap operas, and later through television. So we started to have these conversations. And then we've recorded like 10 episodes of a podcast that we never released. And we started talking about these things. But it's kind of difficult to talk about cinema just in a podcast. And luckily, he's a video editor. He's a filmmaker. And let's say we said, well, let's just do this. Let's just YouTube channel. And then COVID came in, and then we were stuck en la casa de mi suegra por 3 meses. So we're like, fuck it. Let's start working on it. And sí, pues, ¿qué más íbamos a hacer? Wait, I started exercising. I learned to cook for large groups of people. And we started a YouTube channel. And we were going to do a couple of videos. And now we're thinking about, I don't know, maybe 10 seasons. So the next season is going to be Ace of Mexico. And then the following season is going to be about encounters. Because we think about solo un encuentro, Moctezuma y Cortés. Pero está el de Pizarro y Atahualpa en Perú. Hay encuentros en California. Hay encuentros. Throughout the colonial period, it's full of encounters. So we're going to do a season of encounters. We're going to do a season on the colonial period, a season on the 18th century, a season on the 19th, and so forth and so forth. And we, a lot of students are helping us. So our students are starting to create the writing. My husband does pretty much all the editing and the writing. And I'm just like sitting here going, yes, no, yes, no. But it's basically, that's the thing. Like I'm like muchas de las ideas de las que desarrollamos en la escuela, ¿no? Lo estamos poniendo, pero para el público en general. Porque what's the point of me talking about these things only with my students? And my students can talk about it with their families and stuff to reach a larger audience. We've had a really good response from academics. And they're starting to show the videos in their own classrooms in different universities. I just got a comment in YouTube of somebody that said, yeah, I learned about it in UCLA. I was like, what?
Nice.
I was so excited. So yeah, so now we're trying to reach a larger audience. So we're partnering with other people that are doing similar things. We're starting to appear in spaces like this. Thank you very much. And we're hoping to reach a larger audience because we want to get to the point where now let's talk about Frida Kahlo, right? Like now let's talk about the things that we know. Now let's talk about conchas. Let's talk about El Día de los Muertos. Like why that is such a specific and defining thing about Mexicans. Well, if you watch all of our seasons, you'll know how we got to that point, you know?
Ya. No, es increíble. Y aparte por eso, estamos en un momento tan crucial en la historia de que esta información ayuda mucho a entendernos quiénes somos y por qué luchar, de que por qué es importante que yo vote de una manera o de otra. ¿Qué es lo que va a preservar de que a mi persona, a mis valores, a las generaciones que siguen, de que por qué está pasando esto, qué tengo que aprender, qué tengo que desaprender, con qué me quedo y con qué quito de la información? Entonces creo que es un servicio increíble el que estás haciendo y estoy muy, muy agradecida que lo pongas accesible para todos y aparte son clips no overwhelming y está hecho ligero para que podamos aprender con gusto y no de que la lección toda aburrida que te duermes de que a media...
Sí, no, incluso estamos haciendo videos de reacción, like reaction videos. Entonces, we're putting the videos and we're asking people like, I want you and your husband to do a reaction video maybe for next season. Just have everybody be part of the dialogue. It's not just about el profesor diciéndole a todos que es bueno y que es malo. Like, no, like that's not the point. The point is that we all need to be having these conversations. And I don't want to say especially now because people think that things are really bad. Things have been bad since 1492, you know? It's just that it's so visible and it's impossible to escape the injustices and the power of the tools of hate because they're everywhere. So we need to be having those conversations. And my role and my war is to have those conversations with the Latinx or Mexican perspective.
Yeah. Again, I'm very, very thankful and just excited to see what else is coming and what new pride and love for ourselves we can get out of this because it's been so whitewashed, all of our story and our values and our love of ourselves, that it's just exciting to think that we can find this new pride and all that we are, like the good, the bad, the 1,000 shades of colors and whatnot. Like, I'm excited about what understanding this information can do for our communities.
And it helps. And it helps with the political rhetoric of the time because we're not what certain politicians says we are. We cannot be reduced to a couple of stereotypes. And when you understand the complexities of our history, you'll realize that we're much more than possibly your tiny little red politician brain can grasp. Exactly. So that's all I'm going to say because I don't know how political I can get.
I don't know either, but yeah, I mean, we're having a conversation and everyone gets entitled to their opinions. I just know that we need the information and we need to be very critical of every single thing we do. Because like our lives and our future is in risk, so we better pay attention to it. Anyway,
that's right. It's become a life and death decision. Yes.
Y platícame más de Latinos Who Lunch. ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué andan haciendo en estos lados?
Latinos Who Lunch it's slowing down a little bit because my co-host, which you had here, his career is exploding, and I'm also with all of the projects. I'm extremely busy. So we're going bi-weekly, but we're still having these conversations in a much more casual way. We're gonna continue for a while, so that's important. We've been around for 4.5 years now. When we started, there were no Latinx podcasts. There were like 2, maybe. We're 2 or 3, and now there's hundreds of them. And you have no idea how many emails we've gotten from other Latinx podcasters that said to us, I started my podcast because of you. And that feels so amazing. So it's exciting to see that we augmented Latinx queer voices, and it's not hard to find them anymore. They're everywhere, and that's a beautiful thing. And so we're going to continue doing that. Fabi edits, and he's the producer 1 month, and then I do another month. So I'm doing a little bit more focus on music. So I'm trying to produce a whole entire month just based on Latinx women musicians. Like, I'm working on certain things, and hopefully it'll work out. But I always recommend some music again, and I recommend like the weirdos of Latin America.
Yes.
Yeah, like, you're not gonna hear me recommend reggaeton. There's nothing wrong with that. I want you to hear
but they have their platforms,
experimental music from the Andes. Other things that once again that further complicates the narratives about who we are as Latinos, So I feel like we've been successful in Latinos Who Lunch with that. And now, now with Unsettling Journeys, I continue to do that. We continue to do that, but now in a much more historical and a little bit more of an academic way,
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Anything else that you have working on? Please tell us your YouTube page or where can we find you?
So with Latinos Who Lunch in all platforms, in Instagram, Twitter, you can email us at asklwl@gmail.com, because we've been just dedicating entire episodes to answering emails from listeners. Unsettling Journeys is not on social media yet, but soon we will be. I quit social media and I feel happier than ever. I needed to take a break, and I believe it or not, I've been more productive than I've ever had in my life. But you can always email me at emmanuelortegainstructor@gmail.com. And I will be more than happy. If there's anything we talked about in today that you're interested to hear more, I have essays, I have PDFs of books. And then the YouTube channel is for Unsettling Journeys. It's youtube.com/c/unsettling journeys, just like that. So again, it's youtube.com/c/unsettling journeys. And we have, we're about to release 2 more videos in the next couple of weeks. And then we're going to continue to release videos. We're having conversations with my students. They might do their own content also as part of Unsettling Journey. So there's a lot of things happening. And you can always leave us your comments on the videos. And again, you can email us as well. Unsettlingjourneys@gmail.com. Sorry, you can also send us an email at Unsettling Journeys.
That's awesome. And I'm hoping that if anyone has like a deep understanding of this conversations and wants to reach out and share resources, I'm sure like the more the merrier, right?
Yes, and we're looking for volunteers as well. If you know how to edit, that will be great, because like my husband is doing all the work, and I don't know if you saw like some of the animations. He goes into the online archives of places like Brown University, Yale University, Harvard, and he takes primary sources from the 15th and 16th century, and he creates collages and he animates them. So all of the animations that you see they all come from historical documents, and that takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and it really is a labor of love. So if you know how to do that stuff, and if you feel passionate about Latinx history, like, shout out to you first of all, and then reach out to us, and maybe we can collaborate and do something together.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a nice experience to have if anyone wants to intern some hours. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talking to us. Es un placer, como siempre, aprender de una manera relajada y crítica. De nuevo, muy agradecida por todo el trabajo que estás haciendo para la comunidad, y ya quiero ver que tengas un programa y que estés por el mundo impartiendo la verdad.
Ay, como Patti Chapoy. Ok.
Tal
Muchísimas
cual.
gracias, Coca. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody en el proyecto. Yeah, ha sido un placer y un gustazazazo. Y que viva México. Ah, no, ¿verdad?
¡Que viva! Muchas gracias. Yeah. Good night.
Buenas noches.